So with that, we can move to the next session on sustainability in construction industry after the COVID-19 pandemic, conducted by Dr. Chandana Sirivardhana. Dr. Chandana Sirivardhana is a senior lecturer at Department of Civil Engineering of University of Moratuwa and a researcher on disaster management, project management, construction safety, and productivity. He completed his PhD in University of Calgary in 2016 on an integrated framework for worker planning and supervision in construction, and he holds a master's degree in civil engineering, specialized in coastal engineering from University of Tokyo, Japan. He collaborates with Disaster Preparedness and Response Division, Ministry of Health, Sri Lanka, for adapting WHO a safe hospital initiative to Sri Lankan context. And also he is currently serving as the Secretary of the Association of Disaster Risk Management Professionals in Sri Lanka. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Situmini, for that very nice introduction of myself. I hope you can hear me, right?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Right, thank you. And then you forgot one thing that I am a green associate professional, and then followed the advanced course as well. Hopefully, down the road, I will be able to get the accredited professional qualification as well, because that is one of my ambitions to get it. As a person who is interested in this area, I think that is one of the must which you have to have. So, so with that, I would like to take you all to 1 year from now, like 2020 March. Do you remember what we have been doing? So we were like, in fact, worrying about the new virus, and we were worried about the Chinese construction workers, whether they are going to give us this new virus. And then we were kind of protesting in some extents, and then with time, like March, if I'm not mistaken, March 17th, the entire country went to a lockdown. And then April 6th, from April, we started working from home. And since then, we have been working mainly from home, and then with restricted access to our normal life, right? So that means a virus started nowhere, like we never have a place we never heard before, and then now we all are in a lockdown situation with not having moving into the possibility to our normal lives. So with that, let me go into the my presentation. My presentation, I thought to structure it in three segments, where I would like to talk about the pre-corona situation, where we thought everything going very well, and then we were not worried at all about other aspects of what is going on in the environment. We thought everything is perfect and fine. The building size Colombo skyline is different, getting changed day by day. Condominium projects are moving up, and it was good for all built environmental professionals. And then all of a sudden, as I mentioned, COVID came, and then everything completely now upside down almost. So in the future to today we are here, and then future, like within 1 year everything changed, right? So the future, do we think we can predict the future? Do we think that we have a control on that? So let's talk about them in detail in a couple of slides later. So timeline, as from timeline wise, I thought a pre-COVID situation to mark it as before March 2020, and then COVID situation as March 2020 till today, and then post-COVID, maybe probably not sure when, but probably with this vaccine situation, probably from next year, who knows, right? So construction industry, post pre-COVID situation, we have been doing so well. Mixed development projects coming on, individual housing market was booming, and major infrastructure projects going on, and power plants, and country was like slowly developing into a the so-called developed world. And then the central bank reports like the average on average 6 to 7% GDP, and then it was the fourth largest sector in the economy of the country. And construction industry was, like always, it has been labor intensive. Since it is one of the largest or the most important segments of the economy, if there is any drawback or if there is any pitfall, make a huge impact to the entire country's economy. And that is one reason would be we have been employed in the construction industry probably more or less around 1 million directly and indirectly. And most of the infrastructure, the government investment on the infrastructure development projects, and then there were new building construction projects like coming up in Colombo, ITC Colombo Hotels, Colombo City Center, or the Cinnamon Life, or else Altair Tower, which recently opened. And then construction industry always has been sensitive to socio-economic conditions, like post-war condition. With the post-war, there were a lot of investments, lot of construction work moving forward, and even after tsunami, many construction projects were started. And after East attack, that was in 2019 April, the construction industry was moving like slowly, and then it was picking up during early 2020. Then the new government came to power, and then they want to restrict the foreign contractors coming and taking projects, and then the port city project also started moving on. And then construction workers mainly sadly in Sri Lanka we can't find skilled construction workers from our own market. That is one of the main reason would be that most of the young youth, they are interested in easy money of driving a three-wheeler, and then they don't think construction as a secure future, like future guaranteed occupation. So as you can see, three-wheel driver earns more or less a good amount of salary compared to other occupations. So why should you bother working in a hard working environment with all these hazardous situations? Why exposing yourself into a danger while you can drive a three-wheeler and then have a maybe comfortable, in the sense like you can roam around with people, chat around with your friends and colleagues, right? So then like it is generally 62% Sri Lankan population is unskilled, and then therefore the construction industry was having a difficulty in finding skilled workers. They had to bring skilled workers from other countries in, and it said the foreign workers are 2.5 more productive than the local workers, and also they are much reliable. So that showed in the one of our recent surveys as well. So the foreign workers are much reliable than local workers, because most of the local workers are not full-time construction workers. They are doing it part-time when they don't have paddy work at their hometowns. They come to the cities, and then they work in construction industry, and then they go back. So this was the situation back then. And then they have done a couple of studies to investigate what are the factors affecting the construction worker productivity. So here I would like to emphasize that I am going to take man and materials as main points to highlight, because then I can connect it to my talk in the next few slides. So construction workers are, as I mentioned, major building block of the construction industry, and they are the factors affecting their productivity are mainly, we categorize them into 8 factors: management, plants and equipment, and so on, until worker motivation. As you can see, only couple of areas are directly related to or directly accountable to the construction workers. Rest is accountable, or the responsibility has to be taken care of by the management or the construction the company owners or the site managers. And moving on, so we have done a productivity activity analysis study throughout this like last before COVID, like around 2 years, and then we have found out that around 3 hours time or around 30% of their productive working time, they are not engaging in active work, the construction workers. And one of the main reasons would be that they are taking extra breaks, and then they are late to start the work at the beginning of the day, as you can see in this graph, and then they take liquids and then breaks from their normal available breaks, and also they take a lot of time to prepare at the beginning of the day. On the other hand, the MEP subcontractors workers were much productive, and then they come to the site prepared, and they are quality wise, they are much concerned, and then their output is far better. Then other factors affecting the productivity at site are the unavailability of material, and then they are waiting for supervisor to direct them in the morning to what to do at the beginning of the day. And the other areas to focus is that they have been using smartphone, and then also the other substances of smoking and all the other beetle, chewing beetle, and so on. So these are some of the areas that construction workers having not been productive. And then these are the root causes of excessive not why they are not being productive or not non-productive time. I'm not going into the details. These are some of the reasons which we have found, and then they were categorized onto main areas, 6 areas: traveling, waiting, preparatory work, and personal and material handling, and so on. And on the other hand, construction industry has been one of the main industries with higher number of fatal accidents. I am not exactly sure the exact number of the fatal accidents to non-fatal accidents ratio. It has said, it is commonly known as 1 into 13, or some said it is like 1 into 5, or it is like around 1 into 10. So that means one accident, like 10 accident, one fatal accident. So which is quite a very high number. When you compare the rules and the regulations governing the imposing the occupational health and safety of construction workers, Sri Lanka, we don't have construction specific regulations. Like if you look at the Canada, there is a regulation called Bill C-45, where that is to ensure the safety of construction workers by enforcing if you die at the construction site, that means it is a criminal offense of the starting from the owner of the company until the site engineer who is responsible of that construction worker. So that is a criminal offense or the negligence that you can put into the jail. So that's how serious the construction workers, the life of construction workers in other countries. There are certain agencies, they are trying their best to ensure the construction safety at sites, but still it is not a major concern. And sometimes construction workers themselves, they don't pursue, they don't value the importance of this construction safety and adhering to these regulations, rules imposed on them. Also, like before COVID, like I'm still talking about before COVID situation, construction sites were major place or origin of breeding grounds of dengue. As you can see here, so out of the places they observe, the dengue control program observed, it has said that 64% of the construction sites which they have observed have the potential of being a breeding ground, and they have found out 10% of them having larvae. And as you can see, this is the like typical construction dormitories, and then the typical construction environment with the providing enough space to dengue to breed their larvae. So not only COVID, we have been having these issues before, and it didn't come to the surface, and it was under the surface. We were not mainstream, and we have not been talking about them frequently. Then like I am not going into details of these survey results. It was from a study conducted to investigate the occupational health and safety practices in Sri Lanka. As you can see, most of the answer of having policies, no. Training for construction workers, no. Have policies updated, no. And safe poor health and safety conditions were mainly reasons of lack of awareness, lack of supervision, lack of assessment. So mainly, not only the construction workers, the management, the priorities were not the providing a better working place for the construction workers. And moving on, so this study which we have done, so then according to the Department of Labor, we have studied their data and then found out that most of the fatal accidents that happen in the construction site is mainly due to falling from heights and stuck by falling objects, 26%, and then stuck by moving objects and electrocution. So most of these things can be avoided by taking precautionary measures, but if you pay much attention. Not providing safety harnesses, or not providing better tools and equipment, not providing personal protective equipments, and so on. Those are the fatal accident by occupation. Most of the people who died at construction sites were laborers. So these are the reasons: lack of supervision, lack of knowledge and awareness, bad work practices, and unsafe fencing, improper use of PPE are the main reason that we have identified. And then coming to the materials, as I mentioned to you, manpower, construction workers, or the building blocks, and then we need material to do the construction. So the material wise, cement. Without cement, how can you do the construction? And it has been the key ingredient of concrete. So after water, concrete is the most widely used substance on the planet, and it has been huge carbon footprint. And it is the source of about 8% of the world carbon dioxide emissions. So can you imagine the picture? So what we are dealing about? Like previously I have explained about the well-being of the construction workers, of part of our community. And then now we are talking about the cement. It has been 8% of the world carbon dioxide emission. And if cement industry was a country, it would be the third largest carbon dioxide emitter in the entire world, up to 2.8 billion tons. Right? Can you imagine the picture? Right? Third largest carbon dioxide emitter. So we are directly or indirectly responsible for what is happening, which Mike has explained previously. And so the main reason why this where this carbon dioxide emission happen is mainly from the clinker, and then the process during the process of producing that clinker, and also most of these for some reason the most popular brands in the cement brands are using ordinary personal OPC cement without mixing the blended cements. So they can be contain up to 95% clinker. Especially in Sri Lanka, our percentages are way high than the average compared to other countries in the world. So that means the carbon dioxide emission is it is inevitable if you are not regulating this practice of using clinker. And moving on, sand is another material, and again we are disturbing the nature by when we are going to get the sand out from the natural resources. So it is a very slow, continuous natural process of weathering. So it is not going to we cannot replace sand easily, right? So rapidly increasing demand for natural sand is there. That is because we are continuously producing, like we are continuously constructing buildings. And then it can be one of the major sustainable challenges in the 21st century because of the our selfish nature without thinking of the environment, the damage that we are doing. Globally, the extraction of sand and gravel is projected to rise up to 82 billion metric tons by 2060. And these are the consequences. Unsustainable sand mining will contribute to bank erosion and sinking deltas, threatening water supply of local communities, since river sand is natural aquifer and its depletion also affects recharging of groundwater. Important regions for biodiversity and ecosystems are made more vulnerable. Sand removal from beaches can jeopardize the development of local tourism industry. Bizarre scenes in the parts of the world and degradation of the beaches. So, like, as you can understand, everything is interconnected. If you don't look at this holistic nature of the broader picture, we are being selfish, taking one out, and then we are impacting many other areas by doing that. And steel, again, another material that steel production is responsible for 6 to 6.6% of the greenhouse gas emissions globally. So the consequences, I'm not going to mention the climate change, emissions to the air, water and waste. So what we can do, concrete buildings use a lot of steel for reinforcement. This can be 90%, 90 to 100. So we can use it as 90% to 100% recycled steel, which we can use. But then again, we have to ensure the strength. And then sometimes what we do is in the engineering, structural engineering engineers, we blindly follow the building codes, and then we over engineer without a good reason. So we have to be mindful, we have to be smart on exactly using required optimum number of reinforcement, and be efficient as much as possible, as mentioned before. And then approaches like composite design, where the steel and concrete slab work together, there are new practices that we can use. And then construction waste, that is mainly concrete and aggregate, soil and sand, wood materials, brick and blocks. So these are the main concrete waste. And then it can be construction waste can be physical waste, that is due to material waste, from the like starting from the extraction of the material to the demolishing of this building, the entire life cycle of the building. And also non-physical waste like which are not tangible, non-physical, time overrun or cost overrun or labor inefficiencies and so on. So let me with that background, with that background of the pre-COVID situation of the construction industry, let me go into the the COVID situation, and then I don't think I need to explain what is COVID and all. It is a highly contagious respiratory disease which is caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and we had different versions of this before, and then started in Wuhan, as you know, and then still numbers we are counting. And this is very interesting that it is started from China and then moved around the world, and now it is a global pandemic situation. And as Mami Mitsuotiri, who is the head of United Nations Office of DRR, mentioned, COVID-19 has demonstrated that we are all connected, sometimes catastrophically, and until we are all safe, none of us is safe. So we are all connected, right? So that this COVID-19 is a perfect example for that. So if you are not connected, it is just we could have isolate that in Wuhan, right? But it is now a global crisis situation. We are all battling each of this. And then as she mentioned, until we all are safe, none of us are safe, right? So that is the current nature of the world, the other side of the negative side of the so-called globalization. And then I am again these are some of the numbers in Sri Lanka. So we were happy. We were happy that we have been managing it well, and all of a sudden, one outbreak, and then now again we are trying our best to isolate it and then mitigate it without any serious damages. And coming back to these are the different areas that that COVID make an impact. Situmini, do you mind telling me whether my screen is moving or not? Someone has put it in the chat box that screen is not moving.
So now the slide is impact of COVID-19 on construction industry.
Yes, yeah, thank you. That means the slide has moved. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so thank you. So impacts of COVID-19 on construction industry. So there are different areas, right? So like these are the main areas for our economy: tourism, apparel and textile, banking and finance, retail and consumer. So out of these, that is construction is where we are interested in, and it is one of the mostly affected area. So because we can't work from home just like the software industry, so we have to go out and do it. But again, the construction workers has to do it, and then we are dependent on the supply chains from the materials which is coming out from Sri Lanka, and then we are highly dependent on other materials suppliers, sand, cement, and so on. So there are those factories to start work, right? So it is one of the main affected areas, obviously. And then it was the high-rise building projects slowed down. Investors, so like there were many potential investors who were planning to invest in Sri Lanka. They discouraged invest, and then supply and workflow slowed down. So the affected areas are these are the main stakeholders who got affected from this situation. So I got this from the PricewaterhouseCoopers report, and then more or less 52 days we were on lockdown. And these are the this is where how it impacted the COVID-19 into the construction industry. The construction sector has been highly disrupted by the spread of COVID-19. That is because delaying and halting construction projects under development, delaying in payments, because obviously most of these construction projects were funded by the government sources, and then when the priorities of the government is different, so they cannot make the payments as usual. So there was delays in payment, so then that make a cascading impact to the industry, and interrupting the supply chain as mentioned, and shortage of workers due to quarantine periods, and then online working methods are not applicable, difficult to maintain social distance. Like how can you keep social distancing and work in the construction industry? Also the construction workers, they have to share the equipment, tools. Sometimes their habits and behaviors make a huge impact on spreading creating clusters in the construction environment, so they have to be very careful. And it's like it is around a fear of around 100,000 job losses was rendered, and during the outbreak, Chinese workers who went to the their New Year time, and then they couldn't return back, and then 52 days of shutdown period happened, and then local workers were reluctant to report to the sites. And as mentioned before, all the other related industries like cement, paints, building materials, cables, electronic items and chemicals depend on the raw materials from China and India, and also their factories are also under lockdown and they couldn't function. So we were in a kind of a deadlock situation, not only in Sri Lanka but also in other countries. Also this situation happened, and then the workload activity deteriorated across global regions in entire complete year of 2020, and then it was forecasted, and the construction growth in 2020 to start like mentioned previously, it was predicted to have 3.1, but it was revised to have a 0.5%. And then when the price escalations were happened, the dollar rates were fluctuated, your bid rates were different than the current rate, so then you are again in trouble, because you can't match the current market values for the materials which you can't afford, because you bid for a different dollar value. Now the dollar value is different, and when the supply chain completely interrupted, you cannot have a sustainable construction flow. Then this is important, why we are not taking so this is during the COVID situation. So why we are not taking construction workers, which is a very serious question. I think we all need to think about why we are not taking construction workers into the discussion or the dialogue of the sustainability, right? So even it is really good that we have this green building rating systems. So there we have the design stage evaluations, and then why don't we think about how well we are thinking about, how well are we why we are not giving attention to this marginalized community. Marginalized community, this term is a kind of a alarming, or kind of a on your, or like it's a kind of a highlighting a community, like you put a spotlight on a certain community, marginalized. Like even though we don't marginalize intentionally the construction workers, they are actually marginalized. How we call them marginalized? It is because one reason is why the youth is not attracted to construction. Why don't they join and then be proud of calling them construction workers? That is not the situation in the developed part of the world. They are really proud for calling them a carpenter. I'm the Red Seal carpenter. That's how they call in Canada, where I did my PhD, right? So I had the opportunity to work in a construction site for my research for 1.5 years, and then they are really happy, and then they are really knowledgeable. They come and question me of what I am doing. So but here you are reluctant to call yourself a construction worker, right? And also these marginalized communities make some clusters, can create clusters of COVID pandemic. This is the like Singapore situation is a perfect example. Singapore was managing the COVID situation very well, and then the numbers were like kind of increasing, but it is under the manageable levels. But all of a sudden there was outbreak that happened in a dormitories of construction or the migrant workers, right? That is because they are highly vulnerable. We are not giving enough attention to their well-being. Is it like if you look at the sustainable development goals, are we doing a justification to these construction workers, right? So then we are bound to give them good health and well-being, and then clean water and sanitation, and then all the others. So construction industry, as I mentioned, directly and indirectly, 1 million construction workers, like depending on construction industry. So like at least around 200,000 to 300,000 construction workers. So then their main income is this. So we are as a responsible citizens, we have the responsibility of ensuring them the good health and the well-being and all the other sustainable development goals. And here, like we have done another study where we have tried to understand the construction industry, how well how they manage this lockdown situation, and then what are their how these construction workers were their behaviors with respect to this PPE, and then their hygienic conditions and so on. And then we structured it around 4 areas, mainly for workforce management, occupational health and safety, and welfare facilities, dormitories, and so on, accommodation, dormitories, sharing common facilities, and so on. And then emergencies and disasters, COVID, dengue, as well as the other emergencies and disasters. So we conducted the questionnaire survey, and then we found out that construction workers were the strategy these companies which they use to release construction workers from their work is mainly based on the age of the construction worker and their health conditions, performance, and then the distance from the home. And then so then when after the lockdown, when they are calling the construction workers back, they considered again age, health conditions, performance, and then the distance from home. So basically, the construction practitioners or the construction owners or the site managers, they try to avoid the vulnerable groups to COVID retaining at the construction sites. So they wanted to make young with workers with young age, and then good health conditions, and then high performing, and then who are near the construction environment. And then the construction workers concern, like level of concern, it went up during the lockdown, and then again, just like the previous days, it came down. And then this is very interesting, that where the use of personal protective equipment and construction sites, it has gone up. Like for example, the mask, it has gone up drastically, and then it coming down again. And this one is safety shoes. Like this one is actually the hand gloves, and it went up and then it coming down. So likewise, so safety glasses went up and then coming down. So basically, this most interestingly, the mask went up and then coming down. So so construction workers, like during the pandemic, when they were panicked, they knew that they have to wear this, and then started using it, and then with the time they have released using them. Their attention is now fading away. So this is in January this year, and then now the situation might be even worse. So that means we are slowly coming back to the time that we have been. So since the time is running out, so then the sanitary practices in sites and dormitories, situation is same. So they have been practicing well practices in the lockdown period, and it is coming down. Same trend. Safety in the dormitories, it is coming down again. Right. So then this is hierarchy of controls that we all know. If we as the construction practitioners, this is how we can tackle this issue, by using this hierarchy of controls given by the OSHA's guidelines. And then what we can do to eliminate the situation until to like the lowest level of personal protective equipments and to the behavioral changes. So different changes that which we can introduce to ensure the health and safety of the construction workers. Okay, now today we can be happy, or we can take a breath of fresh air that vaccine is around the corner, and then most of the vulnerable groups getting the vaccine, and probably like elderly people got the vaccine, and then construction workers, who are again a vulnerable group, marginalized group, they also can get the vaccine very soon. And then so then that means, like with time, we will be able to overcome this issue. So that means, everything is fine now, happily ever after, the business as usual? So let me tell the real picture, right? So then COVID-19, if you are like, we are all worried about this this COVID-19 situation, or we were locking down, and then still we can't move, and then but the climate change is the much bigger can make a bigger devastation in the future, very near future, if you're not taking corrective actions. So then there is no vaccine against climate change. Then what is the role of built environment professionals? So Bill Gates said, so solving climate change would be the most amazing thing humanity has ever done. By comparison, ending the pandemic is very easy. So basically, the ending the pandemic is very easy when compared to the stopping the climate change. It is very difficult. 51 billion is how many tons of green gases the world typically adds to the atmosphere each year. Net zero is where we need to get to. And then Microsoft, and then Amazon, they are big corporates, corporate giants, and then they are trying to find solutions and be carbon negative, and then remove what they have emitted so far. Hopefully, they will keep their promise. So back in the days when people are talking about this climate change, we thought, okay, it's like this fancy tree hugging hippie kind of a culture, like when I was in my teenage years. But then slowly realized that it is not like what it is. Kind of the picture is very dangerous. According to the World Economic Forum, the report, World Risk Report of 2021, climate action failures, and then that counts as the second most likelihood risk which can occur in the next couple of years, and also a risk which can make the highest impact. So infectious diseases is it is the number one still, but if you look at these green color ones, they are the things that related to the environment. So are we still not paying any attention to this? Are we not taking it still serious? And then look at this, where Sri Lanka is. According to Climate Risk Index 2019, we are the number 2. Right, so all the others are islandic nations, and then the carbon dioxide emission is skyrocketing. So, like, are we feeling it? Do you feel it? Like previously we were talking about Colombo being like just like Nuwara, where it is very cold, and then now it is very hot, around 35 degrees Celsius, and now it is all of a sudden it is raining, and it is sometimes it's not raining. And then when I checked with the director, one of the directors of meteorology department, he said it is not the common seasonal variation. It is a different situation. And then the oxygen we are running out of, no. So Colombo city skyline, it is complete sometimes covered by the fog, which can related to the polluted air. But on the other hand, during the lockdown, this is before, and then this is after, how the nature itself healing itself, right? The nature healing itself. So the pollution has gone down drastically, as you can see in these figures. So that reminds me what Chief Seattle said, where the earth does not belong to man, man belongs to the earth. All things are connected like the blood that unites us all. Man did not weave the web of life. He is merely strand in it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself. I don't know that anything perfect definition than this. He mentioned this many centuries ago, but still it is directly applicable. What we do, whatever we do to this web of life, and then we do it to ourselves. And then back in the days, these ancestors, they had the indigenous knowledge. They have been living in harmony with nature. They haven't like the environmental impact. So before this sustainability dialogue coming into the picture, they have been living without the zero impact to the environment. So everything was going in a circle before this circular economy, and then all this concept coming into the picture. right? But what is happening right now? So we are completely destroying the environment, and then are we achieving the targets of carbon dioxide? No, we are not. We are nowhere near. So it is good that we are our energy use is now mainly natural gases is going up, renewables are going up. It is good, but still the electricity the consumption is also going up. Coal is going down drastically, which is a good sign. But we are still being materialistic and then using energy than we promise to reduce. So are we losing the battle? And then in the middle of the concrete jungle we are planting tree, and then can we be happy? So we have three options. One is business as usual and then live like this and then make the future generations suffer because we have been greedy, and then future generations can blame us, and then we are no longer there to give them the answers. And then we can adapt some of these measures from these international treaties and regulations and agreements, and if we can adhere most, then make a big social transformation, and as a community if you can move into a different state of living, then only we can have this achieve all these sustainable development goals and then be climate resilient. So construction industry, there are like mainly two areas that we can pay attention to. Sustainable development goal 9, industry innovations and infrastructure, and then this 11 sustainable development goal 11, that is sustainable cities and communities. So we have borrowed these resources, the plant from future generations, so we have the responsibility to give it back to them. So then this development, like there is a popular mainstream argument or the discussion that we need to deforest, like make these trees to be cut in order to make the for the sake of development. What about the other countries, Singapore, China, and then Bulgaria and Norway? Their forest cover is like reduction might be around 1%, or it has been increased over the time. But Sri Lanka, it has been decreasing. So what is the reason? So the urban populations, growing population, increasing urbanization, infrastructure developments are the main reasons. We have been greedy. So what happened here? So then we were talking about saving one tree, but why didn't we plan it properly? Where we identified this, where the trees are at? Why didn't we plan the infrastructure properly? So then why didn't we pay the attention to the entire construction life cycle and then give the like look at them in a more holistic way, where starting from the initiation concept stage, where you can introduce building regulations, start from the site selection itself, project selection itself, and then understand whether the project is suitable for our country or not, or our community or not, and then going for the planning stage where the building codes and building regulations are followed. And then why don't we follow this green building? Why don't we follow this, all these building practitioners follow these green building ratings? It is not for just for the as a marketing tool. It is a must, and then it's a need of the hour, right? And then moving on to the construction, and then performance controlling, and then the closing. So basically, if we plan properly, we could have neglected most of the issues that we face in the execution or the operational stage. So these are some of the regulations, which I'm not going into details of these things because of the time limitations. And then green building ratings, which is very important, and then the areas that which we need to pay attention to. And I'm very much thankful for the Green Building Council for doing that, and then doing these green campaigns, and then all these projects that we have been doing. And then I'm really glad that they're taking me part of that also. And then if you look at this, some of the construction that we had, Kandalama, one of these luxurious hotels that we can find, and it has been awarded as the first LEED certification outside the United States of America, and it is the first hotel to get it from the entire world. And also, they have got the ISO certification, ISO 14001 certification, and ISO 2000 certification, and so on. So if they can do it, why can't we do it? Like we have to give the full credit to the person like Jeffrey Bawa, the great architect who is planned properly and then executed it nicely. And this is an interesting study done by one of our students, Professor Anjit, myself, Professor Anjit Disanayaka, myself, and Dr. Chaminda Bandara supervise her. She has actually looked at integrating DRR into these green building ratings, and then this shows how integrating disaster and hazard vulnerabilities would change the current certification, and then how would it would look like with this with the DRR integration. How would it change, right? So that means we in the future definitely not only the green ratings, we have to integrate the Sendai framework for the disaster risk reduction guidelines and their targets into these green practices too, because this future is completely moving towards a disastrous end. So they are like one of the most commonly used tools is like RELI, resilient design and construction. They have been looking in the different areas when they're giving this certification. Socially and environmental resilient design and construction. It's a holistic resilience based rating system that combines innovative design criteria with the latest in integrative design processes for next generation neighborhoods, buildings, homes, and infrastructure. So integrating disaster resilience into the green dialogue. Not only that, we can make it to the entire cities as well. So the making cities resilient. So starting from green buildings and then integrating DRR and then moving into the cities, and this is making cities resilience campaign. So these are some of the examples, and then we have to look at the life cycle, the complete life cycle factors of this building project. Sometimes some people can argue how like integrating DRR into hazard resilient construction practices into green make the buildings ungreen, because we have to add more reinforcement, maybe more concrete, maybe we have to change the structure here and there to make this structure hazard resilient. But if you look at the entire life cycle, it is the enhanced buildings with the hazard resilient features are far beneficial in the long run than the buildings without the hazard resilience features. As you can see in this figure, like they have done a study in United States, the return period of hazard resilience building is 5 years. So with the time, definitely they can recover the investment. Not only that, the critical infrastructure resilience is one of the areas that we have to pay attention. So because these critical infrastructures are like right now at this point of time, we are highly dependent on the internet, electricity, and then the power, and then other infrastructures. So if we don't look at this critical infrastructure resilience, then definitely we are going into the trouble. Like if you can remember 2020 August, where one small failure in Kelorapitiya power plant made entire country lock down for 8 hours. And that made, if that continued, the traffic could have been a much serious issue, and then water could have been a serious issue. We think about the dependency of these critical infrastructures. So everything is connected. Transportation, hospitals, government agencies. Imagine in a COVID situation, we are losing power, and then what will happen to the patients in these hospitals, right? So, and then the telecommunication as infrastructure. So everything is connected, that we have to think about the systemic nature of this risk. Right now, the previously world was only looking at one risk, tsunami, hazard, only one, then think about the multi-hazard nature. now we are looking at this systemic nature, where these interdependencies of each other, because one risk can intensify the the risk drastically because of this cascading nature, because they are interdependent. On the other hand, the global investment is on these critical infrastructures is 90 trillion. So if you look at the big picture right now in Sri Lanka, what happened is the our road development authority, they nicely carpet the road, and then the next day there is another agency come and dig a hole and then put the pipes. So we don't have this integration, right? So we have to collaborative look at this picture, like if you look at the entire the climate change dialogue. And then the other, so then I'm talking here about the moving forward, the beyond COVID situation. COVID situation would be done with this vaccine, maybe probably within couple of years. But this climate change is not going to stop, right? So if we not thinking that the nature is above all, and then nature can make completely knock us down to the ground. So if we don't believe that, we are in danger. So this in left hand side, it is the Iraq example, and in the right hand side, it is the Indian example, where sustainable infrastructure, where we can call it biomimicry, where inspired by the nature, where we can inspire, like look at what is happening in the nature and then make it into our engineering practices, architects and then engineers and then urban planners, that we can use these nature based solutions for our designs. So then these are my last couple of slides, where I'm like where the importance of digitization of the construction industry, where the importance of this building information modeling, and then the integrating industry 4.0 to the construction industry, that will improve the energy efficiency, operational efficiency, and also the occupational comfort. So then, as we all know, the most of this carbon dioxide emission is happening at the operational stage of this construction of this building. So that the building automation systems is one of the main areas that we need to pay attention to. So building information modeling is very important area that Sri Lanka is still have a big gap to fill in. So we are still in dark in these areas. So prefabrication or modular construction or off-site construction is another area that we have to pay attention. And then they are in the industry. There are many good case studies, many good success stories which they have used, which have been using prefabrication or modular construction. So if they can go for modular construction, where completely they design a house out off-site, then they can ensure the well-being of the construction workers, quality of the product, reduce the rework, and then less material, optimization of this reinforcement, and so on. So that can be the best solution for this climate change, like the carbon dioxide emission of contribution from the construction industry. So coming to the end of my presentation, where we can take different routes, different paths. We can be business as usual, and then we can destroy what we have right now. One isolation path would not make us to achieve the sustainable development goals. It is a entire societal and system transformation needed. Are we having that dialogue at the moment, that we have to think COVID is not the danger, it is the climate change, and then achieving the sustainable development goals? Because whether we like it or not, there will be no vaccine for the climate change, and then we all are going to suffer. So as Mike said, it is maybe not the 1.5, it can be the 2 Celsius increment of the global warming, if we are not taking corrective actions. And these are some of the like I try to map the some of the sustainability beyond COVID-19, some of the areas that which we can look into. And then introducing laws and regulations, building regulations, following them properly, building codes, green building ratings and practices, and integrating disaster resilience and disaster risk reduction, and also critical infrastructure resilience, making cities resilient, and giving the workers that dignity, and then thinking about the effective workforce management, and then getting the best from these workers, and then ensuring their health and safety and welfare is very important. And then rethinking about our construction materials, and also construction methods, designs, biomimicry, and then digitization. These are the areas that which we need to pay attention to, right? So if we don't take the actions, we will be ended up like this in the within next 50 years. Sometimes myself might not be there to witness this, but our next generation would be. So we have to remember that we have borrowed this everything from the future generations, and then we have the responsibility to give them back as we have got from our previous generations. Thank you very much. And then again, thank you. I would like to thank Professor Sarath Kotagama, Professor Ranjit Disanayak, and the Green Building Council, and all my research students who helped me to prepare this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for that very insightful and knowledgeable session. We hope you all received a good comprehensive on this emerging area of research and practice for the talk. If you have any questions, you can direct them to Dr. Chandana Sirivardhana and to Mr. K.N. O'Flaherty.
Situmini, there is a question asking whether I can share the presentation with them. I think you are going to upload it to the YouTube, right?
Yes, we are going to upload the YouTube. So, sir, I think we can wind up the session with the time constraints. So we are going, and we can, if you have any questions, you can write them to events.gbcsl@gmail.com. And again, thank you, Dr. Chandana Sirivardhana, and to Mr. K.N. O'Flaherty for your sparing your valuable time to enlighten us. And thank you all for participation as well. So until we catch up with another event of Green Building Council of Sri Lanka, stay safe and have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Situmini.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kent.